Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome to our Ritual Night Talk for February 23rd, 2022. I'm Scott Stenwick, your host for these Ritual Night events, presented under the auspices of Leaping Laughter OTO in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Before I go any further, gotta get the YouTube spiel in. Like, subscribe, request notifications. That way you'll always know when we post a video and when we go live here on the Leaping Laughter YouTube channel. Tonight I am going to be talking about the Star Ruby, which is Aleister Crowley's improved version of the Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram. Now, the Star Ruby is the first of the various Thelemic rituals that Crowley wrote, and laid out in the Book of Lies. That's in chapter 25. And 125 is the square of 5, and it is a ritual of the pentagram. So the association is fairly obvious there. Now, I have included an article that I have written up with thoughts on the Star Ruby, which is a longer, much more involved piece than I have time to present here. But you could read through it and see some additional insights that aren't necessarily going to make it into the video. The other link I've included is, of course, the donation link. No donation is too small. All are appreciated, and all donations go to support the operation of Leaping Laughter OTO in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So, Aleister Crowley referred to the Star Ruby as the improved ritual of the pentagram. And there has been various debates back and forth as to, whether it's improved in a way that actually makes it more powerful, actually makes it more effective. It certainly is more Thelemic. It is like the 11-fold seal versus the middle pillar. The Star Ruby is built with the Thelemic god names in mind, rather than the Kabbalistic god names that you find in the lesser rituals of the pentagram. Despite its improved status, it is still a quote-unquote lesser ritual in that it is a general ritual used for opening and potentially closing the temple, depending on the type of ritual you're doing. So this is a ritual that, like the lesser ritual of the pentagram, is part of your foundational setup. You can use it as part of your daily practice in place of the lesser ritual of the pentagram, and it largely performs the same function. Now, it has some additional components in it, and in some ways it's a little more elaborate, so it has a few more steps. It might or might not be more effective. I have to say, having experimented with different daily practice sequences, I don't find a lot of difference between the Star Ruby and the lesser ritual of the pentagram, except for the following. And this is just kind of a general perception. I don't know if this is something that anybody else has necessarily observed or experienced doing this ritual, but basically the lesser ritual of the pentagram, when you put up your pentagrams, it's kind of more like putting kind of a wall around your sphere of sensation. So, it's going to strengthen and enhance your body of light, enhance your aura, and it's going to provide some protection for that, the kind of the fortress that surrounds your sphere of sensation, and help prevent, getting messed up with other spiritual entities or whatnot. Now, the Star Ruby is a little bit different in that the Star Ruby behaves a little bit more like a bug zapper in the following way. So, the wall that the lesser ritual of the pentagram puts up is kind of like if you've ever seen that practice of like cutting connections away from people. Some esotericists will do that like with a dagger or something like that. The lesser ritual of the pentagram is like that. It just kind of like brings down like a wall. And if there's something that's like kind of hooked into your aura or sphere of sensation, it'll just cut it off. The Star Ruby, on the other hand, it seems like if there's something hooked into your aura, it'll kind of zap it, in that it won't just like cut it off, it'll kind of cast it off with a little more force. And while this doesn't make it a macrocosmic ritual, it does mean that if you're dealing with spiritual influences that are affecting your body of light, it does push a little bit more out into the exterior world. And maybe that's what Crowley meant by improved. That is possible. Now, whether you want to do that, whether you want to do the wall, it seems to me that largely in terms of how it really affects your life, they work pretty similarly. It's just one's a little more vigorous, it really like pushes something instead of just severing the connection. Now, and part of that has to do with how the pentagrams go up, and part of that has to do with how the ritual works. But The key point to remember is that this is a ritual of the pentagram. It is a microcosmic ritual. It works on your sphere of sensation. And so while you are doing a little more projecting out, you're like pushing your sphere of sensation out a little bit more to fill the circle when you're doing the star ruby. It still isn't really a macrocosmic ritual. The corresponding macrocosmic ritual, the star ruby, is the star sapphire, which I will be covering in another video somewhere down the line here. Possibly next week, actually, since I'm going to do the star ruby today. It might make sense to do the star ruby, the star sapphire next, but we'll see. So it's important to keep in mind that many of the other caveats about the lesser ritual, the pentagram, still apply to this ritual. And in the sense that, it's important to understand, this is working on us. It's not doing a whole lot to forces and entities that are out here in the macrocosmic world, except for that aforementioned kind of zap effect that it can have, where if something cooks into your body, it can kind of slap it or push it away. So how the ritual is done is, the structure is pretty similar to the lesser ritual, the pentagram. You're going to see, so it has a version of the Kabbalistic Cross. You do pentagrams to the 4 directions. You call on 4 classes of spirits corresponding to the 4 directions. And you give the signs of Nox, which are something that is a step that is not in the lesser pentagram at all. And that is a difference between the star ruby and the lesser ritual, the pentagram, in terms of the logical steps. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is you go widdershins counterclockwise when you do the star ruby. And the reason you do that is because in the star ruby, as we'll get to, you're not tracing the pentagrams to set the orientation to banishing. So what you do with the star ruby instead, the orientation of banishing in the ritual is set by turning counterclockwise instead of clockwise. It is possible somebody could put together an invoking version of this ritual that would basically be the same, but it would go clockwise. No, Crowley didn't do that. I haven't heard of anybody doing that. It seems like with the way the star ruby is constructed and the star sapphire is constructed, Crowley pretty much had gone to the idea of your foundational rituals being a banishing pentagram ritual and an invoking hexagram ritual, which are ideas that I've fleshed out a little bit more in the context of the lesser rituals and what I call the operant field. So a star ruby, star sapphire is the same kind of thing as an operant field, where an operant field is a lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, followed by a lesser invoking ritual, the hexagram. And they work the same way. You're still looking at a case where you're banishing at the microcosmic level, you're invoking at the macrocosmic level, causing the 2 realms to flow together in this magical field in which you are working. And within that field, your magical work and your magical operations, they work better and more efficiently because the resistance between microcosm and macrocosm has been broken down by merging the 2 realms in the context of your ritual space. So whether or not Crowley necessarily laid those ideas out exactly in his work, I haven't necessarily found an exact correlate to that. It seems like the star ruby and star sapphire were basically constructed around the same idea of what I call the operant field. And I have found that structure does make this style of magic much more effective than opening with double banishings and some of the other things that you see taught in this type of ceremonial work. So take from that what you will. It seems to me that the star ruby, star sapphire is kind of a proto-operant field, and whether or not Crowley really laid it out that way, clearly he experimented enough and kind of figured out what worked when he was building his own rituals. So that's a thought to put out there. Now, to do the ritual, as I said, it starts off with a version of the Kabbalistic Cross. But before that, you have one statement at the very beginning, which is a kind of banishing by fiat, which is, so you breathe in, but hold in the air. So you're pulling in a lot of chi, prana. Hold your breath for a second. And then you cast your finger behind you like this. And you say, Apopantos kakodaminos. And that basically means away evil spirits. So kako means evil, daimonos means spirits. In the Greek, and we'll see this again in the ritual, in the Greek, the word demon, usually spelled D-A-E-M-O-N, daemon, but actually pronounced pretty much a demon in the Greek, it means spirit. It doesn't mean demon the way, it's come to mean that in Christianity. So an agathos daimon is a good spirit, and a kakodaimon is an evil spirit. So in this case, we're saying, get away, evil spirits. Apopantos, get away. Kakodaimonos, evil spirits. Now, in Thelema, the concept of evil is very personal in the sense that things that are perceived as evil are seen as things that get in the way of you pursuing your will and expressing your truth of who you are, fundamentally as a spiritual being. And so really what we're looking at when we're talking about evil spirits, we're saying, get away any spirits that might impede my will. I'm doing this ritual. Okay? So that's basically what it means in the Thelemic context. Okay, so then the next step is the Kabbalistic Cross. So take your index finger that you just did this with, and you do it like this. Soe ophale ishuros ekaristos iao. And basically that has the same meaning in most respects as the Kabbalistic Cross does. Soe is the same as ata. Crowley uses ophale, touching the genitals, to refer to where you touch the genital area with Malkut in his version of the lesser ritual, the pentagram. And then you have Ishuros is mighty, Eucharistos is beneficent. So it's kind of like the power, glory, like in Chesed Yevirah. And then Iao is a Gnostic formula of the Tetragrammaton, also reflected in the LVX signs, Isis, Apophis, Osiris, Iao. And this is over the heart, again alluding to Tiferet. Now, one point about this that some people that I've seen a commentary to this effect online, and I think it's just ridiculous, which is that, so Crowley says ophale, okay? And so there is at least one commenter out there says, oh, well, ophale means penis, and so that means only men can do this ritual. That is absolutely not true, okay? So men, okay, the phallus is the penis. Women, the phallus is the clitoris. In both cases, we're talking about sources of desire energy, particularly sexual desire energy, like what we see in, for example, Tibetan Buddhism has this idea, Vajrayana, has this idea of transmuting desire energy into enlightenment. Thelema works with a lot of those same ideas. So that's why you see a lot of the sexual and desire-based symbolism in Thelema. Now, if you're like, well, yeah, but I'm a woman, I don't have a penis, so I'm not going to say phallus, but I want to do this ritual. Years ago, there was a group down in Austin, Texas, that was experimenting with Soe Okatayas for women. And Katayas, or vagina, has the same gematria as phale or phallus. So in effect, gematrically, you could flip those around. Most people don't do that anymore. That was kind of a movement that lasted, I guess, for a period of time. But on the other hand, there's a lot of gematria encoded into this ritual. It's very possible that would work. I haven't done it myself. And that way myself, and also if you're really gendering it like that, I am male, so maybe it wouldn't work as well for me anyway. So, but generally speaking, the phallus is seen as really the organ that is related to sexual desire energy. In men, the penis. In women, the clitoris, which are the same organ. They just differentiate as we develop in the womb. So that's something to think about there. If somebody tells you only men can do this ritual, no, it's just wrong. I know plenty of women who do it, and you do it quite successfully, and it's not really even something that you need to worry about. So the next step is, what we're going to do is, we are going to do pentagrams to the 4 directions, But you do them a little bit differently than in the lesser ritual, the pentagram. So there's a version of the lesser ritual, the pentagram, where you trace the pentagram, and then you vibrate the name with the sign of the enter, you retire in the sign of silence. It's called the vibratory formula of the middle pillar in the Golden Dawn system. Here we see a little bit of a variation of it in that you don't trace the pentagram. So what Crowley says you do is you want to visualize the pentagram in your forehead. Then you bring your hands up here next to your eyes, and maybe got the pentagram visualizing here. And then you vibrate the God name, and as you do that, you fling the pentagram forward to the wall where it's going to sit. And how I like to do this is I like to kind of see the pentagram like this, and then it's like almost like I'm taking little corners of it and I'm like throwing it like that, so that it goes out into a star like that. That's how I like to visualize that. So you fling it, and then you retire in the sign of silence. So very similar to the vibratory formula of the middle pillar, except it's all basically done in one complete step, along with vibration of the God name. So vibration of the God name, you're going to be inhaling, bringing the God name like all the way down to your feet. And as you're doing that, you're bringing your hands up to here. You're visualizing that pentagram forming. The game hits the feet, shoots back up. And as it shoots back up, you vibrate the name and you cast the pentagram forward. So it's all this one coordinated motion. And then based on the God name, you say it a particular way. So for example, you're supposed to roar Therion, which goes in the east. And so that would look like this. And I'm facing west, the camera east is actually back there. But that first one, it would look like this with Therion. Therion! Okay? So just like that, it's a bunch of motions that you're putting together at once. And that's, in some ways, one of the hardest things about the ritual is coordinating all the pieces. But once you get it down, it flows great. And so then what you're going to do is you're going to vibrate Therion in the east, and then you're going to go around to the north, because we're going Widdershins. And actually, I'm pointing opposite again. That's actually physical north. But because we're going Widdershins. And so in the north, you say Nuit. In the west, you whisper Babylon. In the south, you bellow Hadit. There is an earlier form of the star ruby, which is the original one that appeared in the Book of Lies, where the god names are slightly different. So you have Therion, Babylon, Eros, and Psyche, I believe it is, in the older version. That's actually the Book of Lies, the first version of this that was written. This was apparently later syncretized to go along with the same god name arrangement in Liber Reguli, because here you see the god names mapping what is in Reguli, whereas the older ones were not. So Crowley tried to kind of syncretize some of his rituals together, and one of the things that wound up happening is to change the star ruby so that the god names are attributed more like what you see in Liber Reguli. So in terms of who the Philemon gods are, so Nuit is a principle of infinite space. Hadit is each point within that infinite space. And so essentially what you have is the conception of the monad. You have, it's like, the circle, which is Nuit, is everywhere. And the point, which is Hadid, is each individual point atomized within that infinite space. Now, the union of the two create Rahur Kuit. But we'll get there. Therion and Babylon are like personifications of Nuit and Hadid. So, in effect, Nuit is like the principle that is out here. Hadid is the point. Whereas Therion and Babylon are personifications of those two principles. Crowley saw them as cosmos and chaos in the Vision of the Voice. And they are depicted on the universe card. That's Babylon and the beast conjoined. And that is thought to give birth to the universe as it is the interaction of Babylon and the beast. Babylon also has a role in Thelemic mysticism. The idea of crossing the abyss is, emptying the blood into the cup of Babylon, emerging as a master of the temple, and so forth, which is outlined in Liber Keth. So, which, Liber Keth you should study, and remember, do not concretize, don't take it too literally. Liber Keth is incredibly profound, but you got to understand, it's not actually giving you directions. It's more something to meditate on, something to contemplate. Now, So once you've done the pentagrams all the way around, what you're going to do is you are going to do the signs of Nox. So now the signs of Nox are puer, puella, vir, mulier, and mater triumphant. So boy, girl, man, woman, and mother with child. Okay, remember I'm talking about this idea of Therion and Babylon conjoined as a couple, Nuit and Hadit giving birth to Ra-Hoor-Khuit, which is a manifest universe. That is essentially what you are dramatizing here with the signs of Nox. And with each of the signs of Nox, you say Eopan, or more to the point, it says he shall raise the voice. He shall give the signs of Nox, raising the voice in the paean, saying Eopan. Now, it's not 100% clear exactly what Crowley was thinking about this. Do you say Eopan once? Do you say it multiple times? What order do you give the signs of Nox in? Some of these things can largely be inferred from Crowley's writings, but they're not spelled out. These are AA rituals. Presumably some of that instruction would be given by AA superiors. And so what I'm working with here is more like kind of the common understanding of how this works in the context of my OTO initiations, which is other brothers and sisters that I have learned bits and pieces of this ritual from. So, what I do is I say Eopan for each of the 5 signs. And so I'm going to go, Eopan, 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 Eopan. And so what you're looking at is you're seeing boy, girl, man, woman, but finally you're seeing the reconciliation of those generative principles into mater triumphans, which is mother with child. The child being Ra-Hoor-Khuit, the crowned and conquering child, who in a sense is also you, the magician. In effect, it's like, doing this ritual and enacting this, it's like you're enacting giving birth to yourself. So think about it that way. Finally, the last step of the Star Ruby is similar to calling the archangels, except it doesn't call specific spirits. It's done like this to extend the arms, and you say Promo iunges, opiso mu teletarkai, abidexi sidokis, apodastera daimones. Okay, and so what that is you are calling 4 classes of spirits from the Chaldean oracles of Zoroaster to the 4 quarters of the temple. So, the Yungias, or Rhinax, which is they're named after a funky little bird that does this weird thing with its neck. Look it up on YouTube, it's interesting. So the Yungias are initiators, the Sinokis maintainers, Teletarchis perfectors, and Daimones executors. Daimones also is another form of demon in Greek and does refer generically to spirit, and these are these spirits that execute the processes in the world. These 4 classes of spirits can be mapped to the 4 Kabbalistic worlds. So initiation is Atziluth, maintenance is Bria, perfection is Yetzirah, and execution is Asaya, the material world. So you can think of it that way as, instead of an individual spirit floating around here, you can go into the lesser pentagram, you can take the 4 archangels, you can map the elements back to the worlds too. So the symbolism isn't really necessarily that far afield, but it is interesting that you have groups of spirits now, instead of 4 individual spirits that you're calling on in this phase of the ritual. And they are seen as guarding their respective quarters, just as the archangels guard the respective quarters of the lesser ritual, the pentagram. And finally, arms still outstretched. You say, Flige gar per mohoaster ton pente, kayenta stede hoaster ton hex estake. And that is literally, about me flames the star of 5, and in the column the star of 6 stands. So it's practically a translation of the last 2 lines of that section in the lesser ritual of the pentagram. The way Crowley published it in Liber, about me flames the pentagram, and in the column stands the 6-rayed star. So the visualization there would be similar. You have 4 pentagrams around you. You have a hexagram above, hexagram below. So it's kind of like a cube. Then you've got these groups of spirits at each of the points out here. And the center of it runs, right through your body. So hexagram above, hexagram below, and you're standing in the column of the sixth-rate star. So very similar to what you see in the lesser ritual, the pentagram, particularly Crowley's version. Finally, you repeat the Kabbalistic Cross. And it says, "He shall end as he did begin," is what the instructions say. So I've only seen one person do this, but I've seen one person do the Apopantos Kakoudaimonos before the Kabbalistic Cross again. Is that usually how it's done? You can't necessarily say it's wrong, though, because it's not completely clear. How I do it is I repeat the Kabbalistic Cross. Soi ophale ishuros akaristos io. And then finally, Apopantos Kakoudaimonos. And so that's how I do the ritual. You probably will want to find, if you're going to study it, a source that shows what these are in English instead of Greek. A number of renderings of the star ruby show the words in Greek. If you don't know the Greek alphabet, that can be a little bit frustrating. And the article that I have linked to does include that. So it has the English transliteration of the various sections of the ritual. It goes through it and makes comments. So you should be able to take a look at that and get a pretty good idea of how this ritual works. And so, like I said, one of the big advantages of it is if you really specifically want to work with the Thelemic god names and you want a pentagram ritual, for your daily practice or for your temple work or whatever, that does that, to focus specifically on those deities, this is your ritual to do that. And there is, and it works very well for what it's supposed to do. It has that neat little kind of bug zapper effect to it. That's kind of fun. And I think you'll find that if you practice it too, some of the things seem kind of awkward because they're happening all at once. But it is a very clean, very smooth ritual once you get it down. One thing we did find in the ritual workshop, playing around with this a little bit, I don't know how universal this is, but whereas the lesser ritual, the pentagram, you can modify a number of things in it and not have it affect the ritual too much. The star ruby is not quite as flexible. It's harder to change things up in the ritual and still have it work right. And I still don't know exactly why that is. I don't even know, you may go ahead and play around with it and not find that. I just thought it was an interesting observation that we came to after some experimentation with the ritual. There is a lot of gematria stuff embedded in it. Some of the Greek isn't necessarily grammatically correct, and it's flipped around a little bit to get a certain numeration that Crowley was looking at. Apparently, when he was working on this, he was working pretty intensively with Greek Kabbalah and gematria, and that's part of the reason the ritual's in Greek. So, keeping all those things in mind. In this case, you definitely want to learn the ritual as it is and really get a sense of how it feels before you start doing any playing around with it and modifying it. Whereas lesser ritual, the pentagram, a little more forgiving than that. Although, I would still make the same recommendation to a beginning practitioner that they learn the standard version before moving on to making modifications, which I find there are a lot of students who want to do modifications to it right away and so forth. And those could turn out great, but I find they generally turn out better if you go ahead and you learn the standard form and then from there go on to make whatever modifications you want to make. So with that, I'm going to sign off here for the evening. Remember to like, subscribe, request notifications so you always know what's going on here on the Leaping Laughter YouTube channel. You can take a look at the link, the Thoughts on the Star Ruby article that is included in the description, and the donation link is available for anyone who wishes to make a donation, no matter how small, to help support the operation of Leaping Laughter OTO in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And with that, thank you all very much for watching, and have a great rest of the evening. Love is the law, love endure well.